So this is a couple of segments from the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Kimmerer, and it talks about her experience creating black ash baskets, just like the video you just watched. Okay, so forgive me if I make a few mistakes, but here we go. So, a black ash basket. Donk, donk, donk. Silence. Donk, donk, donk. The back of the axe meets the log to make a hollow music. It drops 3 times on one spot, and then John's eyes shift a fraction down the log, where he strikes again. Dunk, dunk, dunk. As he raises the axe above his head, his hands slide apart on the upstroke, then together on the down, shoulders pulling tight under his chambray shirt, his thin braid jumping with every impact. All the way down the log he pounds triplets of crushing blows. Straddling the end of the log, he works his fingers under a split on the cut and gives it a tug. Slow and steady, he peels off a strip of wood the width of the axe head in a thick ribbon. He takes up the axe and pounds another few feet. Tunk, tunk, tunk. Again he grasps the base of the strip and peels it back along the pounded line, taking the log apart strip by strip. By the time he pounds the last few feet, he has worked off an 8-foot splint of gleaming white wood. He holds it to his nose to breathe in the goodness of new wood and passes it around for all of us to see. John coils it into a neat hoop, ties it fast, and hangs it on a nearby tree branch. Your turn, he says, and hands off the axe. My teacher this warm sunny day is John Pigeon, a member of the large renowned Pigeon family of Potawatomi basket makers. Like the rest of the family, John is also a master teacher, committed to sharing what has been passed on by generations who came before. What was given to him, he now gives back to the people. Some basket classes I've taken start with a neat pile of materials all assembled on a clean table. But John doesn't hold with teaching basket weaving, where the splints come ready-made. He teaches basket making, beginning with a living tree. Black ash, Fraximus nigra, likes to have its feet wet. In floodplain forests and edges of swamps, black ash mingles with red maples, elms, and willows. It is never the most common tree. You only find it in scattered patches, so it can take a long day of tromping over boot-sucking ground to find the right tree. Scanning a wet forest, you can pick out the black ash by its bark. And yet it's not enough to simply find black ash. It has to be the right one, a tree ready to be a basket. An ideal basket ash has a straight, clear bole with no branches in the lower trunk. Branches make knots that interrupt the straight grain of the splint. A good tree is about a hand breadth across. The crown, full and vigorous, a healthy tree. A tree that has grown directly up towards the sun will be straight and fine-grained, while those that have wandered a bit to find the light show twists and turns in the grain. Some basket makers will choose only trees perched on a hummock in the swamp, while others will avoid a black ash growing next to a cedar. Trees are affected by their sapling days as much as people are by their childhoods. The history of a tree appears in its growth rings, of course. Good years yield a wide ring, poor years a thin one, and the pattern of rings is critical to the process of basket making. Traditional harvesters recognize the individuality of each tree as a person, a non-human forest person. Trees are not taken, but requested. Respectfully, the cutter explains his purpose, and the tree is asked permission for harvest. Sometimes the answer is no. It might be a cue in the surroundings, a vireo nest in the branches, or the bark's adamant resistance to the questioning knife that suggests a tree is not willing, or it might be the ineffable knowing that turns him away. If consent is granted, a prayer is made, and tobacco is left as a reciprocating gift. The tree is felled with great care so as not to damage it or others in the fall. Sometimes a cutter will make a bed of spruce boughs to cushion the landing of the trees. When they finish, John and his son hoist the log to their shoulders and begin the long walk home. Today, John scales away the spongy bark, which would deflect the power of the axe, and gets to work. When he pulls the edge of the first strip, you can see what's happening. Beating the log crushes the thin-walled cells of the early wood, breaking them down and separating them from the late wood. The log fractures at the dividing line between spring wood and summer, so the strip that peels off is the wood between annual rings. Depending on the individual history of the tree and its pattern of rings, a strip might come off carrying the wood of 5 years, or sometimes just one. Every tree is different, but as the basket makers pound and peel, he is always moving back through time. The tree's life is coming off in his hands, layer by layer. As the hoops of splint grow more numerous, the log itself grows smaller and within hours is a skinny pole. See, John shows us, we've stripped all the way back to the time it was a sapling. He gestures to the big pile of splint we've accumulated. Don't ever forget that. It's the whole life of that tree you've got piled up there. With splints finally prepared, we're poised for weaving. What we had mistakenly thought was the real work of a basket. But John stops the class, his gentle voice gaining a hard edge. You've missed the most important thing, he says. Look around you. We look. At the forest, at the camp, at each other. At the ground, he says. In a circle around each novice is a litter of scraps. Stop and think what you're holding. That ash tree was growing out there in the swamp for 30 years, putting out leaves, dropping them, putting out more. It got eaten by deer, hit by a freeze, but it kept working year in and year out, laying down those rings of wood. A splint fallen on the ground is a whole year of that tree's life, and you're about to step on it, bend it, grind it into the dirt. That tree honoured you with its life. There's no shame in messing up a splint, you're just learning. But whatever you do, you owe that tree respect and should never waste it. And so he guides us as we sort through the debris we've made. Short strips go into a pile for small baskets and decoration. The miscellaneous bits and shavings get tossed into a box to be dried and used for tinder. John keeps the tradition of the honourable harvest. Take only what you need and use everything you take. Just about everything we use is the result of another's life, but that simple reality is rarely acknowledged in our society. The ash curls we make are almost paper thin. They say that the waste stream in this country is dominated by paper, just as much as an ash splint. A sheet of paper is a tree's life, along with the water and energy and toxic byproducts that went into making it. And yet we use it as if it were nothing. The short path from mailbox to waste bin tells the story. But what would happen, I wonder, to the mountain of junk mail if we could see it in it the trees it had once been? If John was there to remind us of the worthiness of their lives. John calls us back to the circle for the next step, assembling the bottom of the basket. We're doing a traditional round bottom, so the first 2 strips are laid out at right angles in a symmetrical cross. Easy. Now take a look at what you've done, John said. You've started with the 4 directions in front of you. It's the heart of your basket. Everything else is built around that. Our people honour the 4 sacred directions and the powers resident there. Where the 2 basket strips meet, at the intersection of those 4 directions, is right where we stand as humans, trying to find balance among them. See there, John says, everything we do in life is sacred. The 4 directions are what we build on. That's why we start like that. Once the 8 spokes of the framework are twined into place with the thinnest possible strips, each basket begins to grow. We look to John for the next set of instructions, but there are none. He says, you're on your own now, the design of the basket is up to you. No one can tell you what to create. We have thick and thin splints to work with, and John shakes out a bag full of brightly dyed splints in every colour. The tangled pile looks like the singing ribbons on the men's ribbon shirts in the evening powwows. Just think of the tree and all its hard work before you start, he says. It gave its life for this basket, so you know your responsibility. Make something beautiful in return. Towards the end of the afternoon, in the lengthening shadows, the work table begins to fill with completed baskets. John helps us add the decorative curls that are traditional on small baskets. The black ash ribbons are so flexible that you can embroider the surface of the basket with loops and twists that show off the glossy sheen of the ash. We've made low, round trays, tall, thin vases, plump apple baskets in textures and colours of every kind. Here's the last step, he says, handing out Sharpie markers. You've got to sign your basket. Take pride in what you did. That basket didn't make itself. Claim it, mistakes and all. He makes us line up for a photograph, all holding our baskets. This is a special occasion, he says, beaming like a proud father. Look what you've learned today. I want you to see what the baskets have shown you. Every one of them is beautiful. Every one of them is different, and yet every one of them began in the same tree. They are all made of the same stuff, and yet each is itself. That's the way it is with our people, too. All made of the same thing, and each their own kind of beautiful. Today, my house is full of baskets, and my favourite are pigeons. In them I can hear John's voice, can hear the zonk, 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 and smell the swamp. They remind me of the years of a tree's life that I hold in my hands. What would it be like, I wondered, to live with that heightened sensitivity to the lives given for ours? To consider the tree in the Kleenex, the algae in the toothpaste, the oaks in the floor, the grapes in the wine, to follow back the thread of life in everything and pay it respect. Once you start, it's hard to stop, and you begin to feel yourself awash in gifts. I open the cupboard, a likely place for gifts. I think, I greet you, jar of jam. You glass who was once sand upon the beach, washed back and forth and bathed in foam and seagull cries, but who are formed into a glass until you once again return to the sea. And you, berries plump in your Juneness, now in my February pantry. And you, sugar, so far from your Caribbean home. Thanks for making the trip. In that awareness, looking over the objects on my desk, the basket, the candle, the paper, I delight in following their origins back to the ground. I swirl a pencil, a magic wand lathed from incense cedar, between my fingers. The willow bark and the aspirin. Even the metal of my lamp asks me to consider its roots in the strata of the earth. But I notice that my eyes and thoughts pass quickly over the plastic on my desk. I hardly give the computer a second glance. I can muster no reflective monument for plastic. It is so far removed from the natural world. I wonder if that's a place where the disconnection began, the loss of respect, when we could no longer easily see the life within the object. And yet, I mean no disrespect for the diatoms and marine invertebrates who 200 million years ago lived well and fell to the bottom of an ancient sea, where under great pressure of a shifting earth they became oil that was pumped from the ground to a refinery where it was broken down and then polymerized to make the case of my laptop or the cap of the aspirin bottle. But being mindful in the vast network of hyper-industrialized goods really gives me a headache. We weren't made for that sort of constant awareness. We've got work to do. But every once in a while, with a basket in hand, or a peach, or a pencil, there is that moment when the mind and spirit open to all the connections, to all the lives, and our responsibility to use them well. And just in that moment, I can hear John Pigeon say, "Slow down. It's 30 years of a tree's life you've got in your hands there. Don't you owe it a few minutes to think about what you'll do with it?"